Good morning. Happy Sunday. There's some confusion about what is an ethical violation and what is legal malpractice, at least from what I could see in the comments on my Luis Sanchez videos. And so I'm hoping that I can give you some understanding of, generally speaking, the difference between an ethics violation and legal malpractice. An ethics violation is when an attorney does something that is counter to the rules of professional conduct for that state, like the model rules or the American Bar Association rules of professional conduct or your state's rules of professional conduct, depending on what they've implemented and how. It may also include statutory violations. For example, California has the Business and Professions Code. I think it's somewhere around section 6,800-ish is where rules for the practice of law, or where statutes applying to the practice of law come into play, and there are several in there, some of which are pretty encompassing. Like there's one that basically states that if an attorney breaks the law, any California or federal law, or actually any other state's law if he's subject to the jurisdiction of that state, and the crime involves moral turpitude, then that attorney can get punished by the bar in addition to whatever criminal punishment he receives. So that's an ethics violation. It doesn't necessarily include a client, but generally 9 times out of 10 it's going to include where the attorney has messed around with his clients in some fashion. Like if he commingles trust fund assets with his operating account, or if he divulges confidential interests, or if he has a conflict of interest that he doesn't disclose with his client. Something like that would typically be an ethics violation. How do you deal with an ethics violation? Well, that's pretty simple. In California, you would file a complaint with the California State Bar. In, for example, Utah, you would file a complaint with the Office of Professional Conduct. The regulatory agency, be it the State Bar or the Office of Professional Conduct, will conduct an investigation. And if they believe that there is merit to any of the allegations of unethical conduct, then they will prosecute the attorney. Yeah, they'll prosecute him. I mean, it's not necessarily a criminal deal. I mean, it is civil, but it can result in the attorney being fined, being admonished, being suspended, or even being disbarred. And the way bar associations work, the way the practice of law works throughout the various states and the federal courts is, generally speaking, if you're disbarred in one state or in one court, it goes to all the other states and all the other courts. They all recognize everybody else's suspensions and disbarments, and they all will enforce it in their own jurisdictions. So disbarment is no bueno. If you're disbarred in one jurisdiction, generally speaking, you're going to be prevented from practicing law in all of the others in the United States. So that's an ethics violation. Now, again, if you really want to get a good grip on what an ethics violation is, review the American Bar Association's rules of professional conduct, or the model rules of professional conduct, or your state's rules of professional conduct. That'll give you a good idea of what may be an ethics violation. Now, legal malpractice is different. Legal malpractice is where your attorney, i.e. the attorney that you have retained, fails to meet the standard of care that a reasonably competent attorney would have maintained. It doesn't have to be unethical. It can be a simple mistake. A simple mistake that isn't an ethics violation could end up being legal malpractice. A quick example would be if your attorney fails to file your lawsuit within the time period prescribed by the statute of limitations. What you need to prove, generally speaking, and again, this is going to vary state by state, is that the attorney failed to meet the standard of care that a reasonably competent attorney would have done. They did or did not do something that they should have done, or they did something they shouldn't have done, or they didn't do something they should have done, I should say. And as a result, it costs you money that you otherwise would have received. And you generally have to prove that you otherwise would have received it. For example, in a personal injury case, let's say you were injured in an automobile accident. If your attorney fails to file your lawsuit within the time prescribed by statute, California, that'd be 2 years. Other states may vary. Then if you want to sue your attorney for malpractice, you would have to prove that a reasonably competent attorney would have filed the lawsuit within the time period prescribed by the statute of limitations and would have gotten you a judgment, and your judgment could have been collected, and the damages that you are then entitled to are how much money you would have collected on your judgment. So it's not all rosy. It is a pretty complicated process. There's essentially a trial within a trial. You have to prove that you would have prevailed on the underlying cause of action. So as you can tell, what you need from that particular set of circumstances is you need to be able to prove monetary damages. That's legal malpractice. You need to be able to prove monetary damages. Statutory injunctive relief really doesn't, I can't really imagine a situation where injunctive relief would come into play, because your injunctive relief is just to terminate your relationship with the attorney if you believe the attorney is no longer representing you. You always have the right to fire your attorney. Now, if we look at Mr. Sanchez's case, he might have a little bit of problems because according to his attorney, Michael Teeter, or at least his attorney at the time he filed his legal malpractice lawsuit, he alleged $300,000 in damages from lost wages. I want to point out that Mr. Sanchez was determined to be indigent by the court, and he was assigned a public defender. That's problem number one. Problem number two is the $15,000 bail that was required, or bond. California calls it bail, other states call it bond. I might use either. He couldn't raise that in whole or in part. He couldn't raise the 10% for a bail bondsman. That'd be only $1,500. Couldn't do it. And number three, he actually ended up getting bailed out by his brother, at least according to Mr. Sanchez. So does Mr. Sanchez, can he prove his $300,000 in lost wages? Probably not, but he might be entitled to something. Anyway, that's all I got for you this morning. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.